Right, we're going to have a little look at wheel bearings and how you know, or how you can diagnose if there's going to be a problem, or they're playing up, or they're going to need replacing. So what we're going to do is we're going to drive along a bit, because I think this car, Mark III Golf, I think it's got a wheel bearing on the way out, and hopefully we'll be able to pick it up and hear it on the camera, so you can see how it sounds when you think your wheel bearing might need replacing. But let's have a drive along and see if we can pick it up on the camera and see if we can hear the noise. It's coming up to about 50. I think there's a sort of a whining, pulsating, whining, low vibration noise, and I think it's coming from that rear wheel arch there. Now I'm going to see if it gets any louder. We're going to go to about 50 now. Now I think that sounds quite whiny, and I think it's coming from over there. What we can also do is just slip it into neutral and take the revs off, just to make sure it's not an engine noise, and see what happens. That's revving it, but as we slow down, the pitch has gone from a bit of a high pitch, it's starting to get a bit lower down the pitch now. We're going to have a look, take the wheel off, and just check it out and see if it is a wheel bearing. So I've got the car jacked up, jocked under that wheel, front and back, because obviously the handbrake's off. I'm just going to give it a spin, see if we can hear it. Now you can kind of just hear the drum, the pads just skimming on the drum, but most of that noise, I think, does sound to me like the bearing. Right, I've got the car jacked up, got the axle stand. Now interestingly, when I took the wheel off, this little hub, this grease protector thing, cap, this just fell off. It wasn't secured at all, so that's a sign that, because this is a protective cap to stop water, dirt, all sorts getting in there, and that was just kind of hanging off like this, so that was interesting. But anyway, right, so first we're gonna straighten out this pin there. A little bit fiddly, but get there in the end. And then out that comes. This little thing here is the locking cap. That off that comes now, and then that leaves us with the hub nut. Right, I've got a pair of grips now. As you can see, my tools are appalling, which means that you don't really have to. Right, see, that's just nipped up. That wasn't very tight at all. That's just going to come off now, this nut. Now, it does look to me, if you see that, but it doesn't look great. The grease does look a bit tainted by the rusty shade of red brown. And behind here we've got a little washer. This washer's got a little locating tab right here. That tab goes in the groove. Take that off. Now, this should now, hopefully, it should just think about coming off. Right. It's the old bearing. Now we're going to put that aside. We'll have a little look at that later. That's one half of the bearing, and in there is the other half of the bearing race. So it's always a good time when you take your hub off as well to check the condition of your brake shoes. Right, there we go. So, well, at least there's some grease on it, but essentially this is our bearing contained within this hub. So this is what we've got to deal with. But the brakes inside look okay. Don't look too bad. Plenty of meat on the shoes, so they'll be okay. No sign of any brake fluid leaking out there at all, so it should be okay. So we're going to basically clean this up, and then the next stage is to get the rest of the bearing, the other half of the bearing and the races out of this hub. This hub looks pretty good as well. It's only done 66,000 miles, this car, so there's no groove on there or anything. Sometimes there's such a big groove in the brake hub that you can't pull it off the shoes, but that's a different story. Right, so here's the rubber seal. So that just pulls out like so. And then what that should do is release the other half. Now you can see that. Not looking too bad. Man. Let's have a good listen to this. Now that sounds awful. And that's just pressing down. Not that hard. Wait for the traffic to go past outside. Yeah, that's not good. Let's try the other one on the other side. Try not to get any grease inside the hub. Oh yeah. I mean, that's just, it feels gritty. So this protective cap, it just goes to show you, if that just comes off a tiny bit like that, or doesn't sit in there right, water and all the salt from the roads gets in, and then it won't be long and that bearing's gone. So there you go. Anyway, what we'll do is we'll put a new bearing in it, we'll clean it all up, put a new bearing in it, and then see how it goes from there. So what we're looking for here, I've flipped, there's two races. This race here, which is the big side, the car side, and this smaller race here, if I turn it over, you can see that sitting in there, and they're kind of pressed in there. But you don't need a puller to get it out, because what they've done is they've put these little grooves in there, and you've got to get something in there, obviously something a bit bigger than this little screwdriver, and you've got to start whacking it out a bit at a time, and then that should come out. So whack 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 whack. So I'll do that. Now I'm going to use this. It's probably not the best thing to use, but that's what I've got. And just start to prop it up on something now. Right, I've just got a couple of bricks there, so I can carry on getting this out. There we go. So, as you can see, that's that one out. And we're going to keep this because we're going to need this to get the new bearing races in. Let's put that to one side. And opening that up, a little bit difficult, more difficult to get in there now, but basically you just got to do the same on the bigger one. Aha! And there we go, and out pops this one. And again, we're going to keep this because we're going to use that to push the new bearing in. So the next thing now is to give this a really good clean up. And what you've always got to make sure while you're doing this as well is to not get any grease on the inside there, but you can always use a bit of brake cleaner to clean that out before you put. When you've got the races out, I would highly recommend using a pair of Calvin Klein pants as a way to get all that out. No, it's about a £20 pair of pants there, reduced to scraping out a load of old grease out of a wheel bearing. But there you go. That's what you get. That's what you get for designing the Nazi uniform, Calvin Klein. Clean all that grease out, all the old grease and all the old grit, and get that all nice and cleaned up. Going to put a little smear of grease in there, just to help the new one in. Same on the other side. Have a look at the new bearing now. So what have we got in here? We've got some grease, that's really handy. That's some new high temperature grease. The new protector cap, which is a result. One bearing, larger bearing and race. Smaller bearing and race. A new split pin or cotter pin. And the new rubber grease seal. There we go, that's good. So it all comes in the kit, which is really good. This is a FAG one, or FAG. Excuse my language, got to remain politically correct at all times. But this was £16. You can probably get them cheaper than that off of eBay. I think I've seen them for about £12. But whether they come with grease or not and the extra bits, I don't know. But that's the set I bought, £16. So it's not too bad really. Right, I'm going to start with putting our new, the larger race in. So that sits in about there. And we've got the old one, and what we're going to do, we're going to start getting the new one in by using the old one to tap it in. Now I've marked the old one up with a little pencil mark just in case you get the two mixed up, which hopefully you won't. But anyway, let's see how this goes. Gently start tapping it round. Now it's got to about here and I'm getting sort of in danger of starting to hit these bits now, so what I'm going to do is try and find a socket. It's going to go over there and use the socket to push this in the rest of the way, but before I do that I don't really want that to get stuck back in there and be a nightmare. So what we're going to do is try and cut a slot in this so it won't get stuck in. But now what I've done here is the old race, if you see that, but just used a grinder to grind a little slot in there. I've tidied up all the edges as well with a file, but what that's going to do is it was starting to get stuck in there, so cut this slot in there. Now that hopefully what that should mean is I can carry on tapping that in with our undersized socket, and hopefully now it won't get properly lodged in there where we can't get it out. So just going to carry on seating this race in. You can hear the hammer tone change as the old one sets in. It's like a higher pitched. It's not so much of a thud. There you go, and that's seated. Now if this comes out, there we go, it won't get stuck in there. We've cut the slot in. So I'm going to turn it over now, carry on with the smaller one. Hopefully we can see there that that's nicely seated now against that back lip. Get the small brace out. Now obviously these always go in with the thinner side facing outwards, so you can actually get the bearing in. Obviously if you put it that way you can get the bearing in. Race, and again I've marked it up. I've put a little pencil mark on there just so there's no chance of getting these two mixed up. And I'm going to use this and start seating this one. Just start really gently tapping it and you'll feel it, you'll hear it go in, or you'll feel it go in. Right. That's already starting to get stuck in there. Oh, there you go, there's a small one. Ground my little groove in it there. Just use an angle grinder with a metal cutting disc on it. No problem at all. So again, I'm going to just start seating this one in. There you go. So that is stuck in there, but now I've got that slot in there, I think it's going to be a lot easier to get that out. Now obviously if it wasn't for that slot, that would be a nightmare getting that out. You'd probably have to push the bearing out again. Alright, so there you go. Top tip. That's all done. Now it's time to stick a bit of grease in there. Got this grease that came with the pack. Start working some of that in. Start getting a bit of grease on the bearing. So, get it all in there. It's the fun part. This is the bigger bearing, so this can go in when the hub's off the car. Pop that in like that. Get a bit of grease all in there. And then we've got a nice new seal. Just going to push that into place. Again, making sure not to get any grease. That's it. It's nicely in. And what I'm going to do is just take the excess off of here. Right, now that can go onto the car now. Right, back over to the car. We're going to stick some grease out of this sachet. Onto the shaft. Again, you've got to make sure you don't get any on the brake shoes. It's really important. Now we're going to lift this up. Sits that in there nicely. Feels better already. Next to go in is our other bearings. So nice clean gloves. Let's get some grease on this. Nice bit of grease in there. In goes our smaller bearing now. That sits in nicely like that. And then we want to get all of this grease in there, all the rest of the grease. Just pile in. So there. Actually, I probably should have put that on first before I did that, but anyway. That'll all just push out. push our little washer on. And again, any grease that's left in the sachet, we're just going to get in there, and this will try and be a bit of a barrier for any liquid to get in. So then we want to put our nut on. Now this nut has got a very, very low torque setting. So what we're going to do is, while spinning this round, just literally just a bit of a nip up there. No more than that. Make sure there's no play in it. And then we've got, we'll work out where right, so there's our there we go. In our new pin goes. And this, just want to grab one leg and the other leg. And just tap that up. And then, once again, the last of the grease. Any more we can get in there. Every last bit out of there. Little clean up. And then last but not least, our nice new cover that came with the kit. And that's just going to tap in. He says. Yeah, that's it. That's the new cap on. Now let's have a look. Straight away, there's none of that grinding sound, that rumble. Time to do the rumble test. Let's see what it sounds like now. That is a vast improvement. No play in there at all. Right, we're back on road. And you know, it was definitely a dodgy bearing, but I guess the test is, what's what's it going to be like on the road. So I think already it's quieter. Typically it's just started raining, so you might hear a bit of the rain noise. But there's definitely no pulsating whining coming from that side of the car. I mean, it was crazy going down a motorway. It got to the point where it got really loud, and now it's lovely and quiet. So it's a weird one because the noise of these wheel bearings, it kind of creeps up on you. I'm just going to drive along quietly now so you can see. I know there's a lot of noise with the windscreen, but to me it's much quieter, much quieter. So there you go, thanks for watching.